Murli notes, December 27th, 2022. Baba gives an interesting psychological reason why it is important to accept the concept of a 5,000-year identically repeating cycle. The mindset of traditional Hindus is that any spiritual information that they have not heard before cannot, by definition, be true. Baba is well aware that it is impossible to change fixed ideas in people. Therefore, it is more likely they will be open to considering the new information he is giving on the basis that it is not new, because they would have heard it in the previous cycle. In general, Hindus believe in the Bhagavad Gita, although most Hindus have neither read nor studied it in its entirety. Baba says the ratio of truth to falsehood in the Gita is about 1%. He says, ate melun, which means the amount of salt needed in dough for making chapati. That is about 1%. The Gita is approximately 700 couplets, which means about 7 couplets are accurate. And that is sufficient for him to anchor people to his argumentations. Baba is a master of argumentation. He knows exactly what can bend the minds of whom. He also teaches us this form of argumentation so that we also can bend the fixed mentality of people of any culture, tradition, or belief system, including conventional science. Being the ocean of knowledge, he is also a master of logic. Any belief that is blind has logical flaws, which he can easily point out and refute, as well as deconstruct concepts that are incoherent, illogical, and inconsistent. Expert Hindu philosophers and scholars must necessarily stand down when confronted with irrefutable philosophical arguments. Most BKs have not recognized the importance of churning the Murlis. There is a difference between churning the Murlis properly and churning the Murlis in such a way that people take flights of fancy or mix their own ideas into it. Baba's Gyan requires the student to become skilled in circular thinking. Most people are unfamiliar with the difference between circular thought and linear thinking. The default iron-aged position of the intellect is linear thinking, and therefore it takes much effort to shift gears and process ideas through circular thinking. The most important and essential key to circular thinking is to grasp the identical repetition of the 5,000-year cycle. Most BKs adopt this system of thought at the simplest level of the example used by Baba. He says, if a fly passes by now, it would have passed by in the same way identically in the last cycle. Then they would extrapolate the concept and put it in moral terms. They would teach others that if you do this mistake now, then you will repeat it every kalpa. This is agar magar. So agar magar is an often used Hindi expression which means if, then. They assume that this turn of phrase proves that they are talking in a logical manner. However, they are not always. The syllogisms are faulty, the premises are not true, and therefore any conclusions are highly questionable. Those who argue in this way are trying to influence and manipulate people to accept their preconceptions and prejudices as moral reasoning. This is different from the philosophical use of the system of logic for the purpose of clarifying concepts, particularly concepts that are not known or are not accepted by the majority of the public. How does this function in a non-Hindu milieu? Certain fundamental principles are assumed to be true unquestionably, such as the theory of evolution, the concept of progress, public opinion, that the scientific or objective method of inquiry applies to all things that exist, that anything non-physical either does not exist or is merely subjective conjecture. Circular thinking is relevant, particularly at the confluence age, where the beginning and the end of the cycles are linked. Baba uses the premise that if someone does something that has a profound, lasting, and positive impact on humanity, then people remember it for many generations. If the event is traumatic or negative, they try to forget it, but cannot. It is burned into the soul. The story of these events is passed down through the generations as historical fact. In addition, identical repetition of the cycle implies that historical events that have a profound impact on all of humanity, they leave a strong memory scar on the soul. When that time comes around again, it awakens premonitions of its occurrence and gets anticipated by spiritually sensitive people in the human community. Identical repetition of the world cycle means identical repetition of the human experience and human history. This implies that as well as remembering the past, you can also remember the future. Whatever exists in the future comes into the present through the passage of time. It is once again experienced and then passes into the past as a memory. Premonition, precognition, and anticipation of future momentous events is a normal function of human consciousness. The great conflict between good and evil, dark and light, world destruction and regeneration persists in myths, legend, and in the geological record. When the time comes close, people remember with anticipation as well as apprehension. People who believe there can be no new information are able to comprehend that ancient knowledge can reappear. Baba focuses on the memorials of momentous transformative historical events and the link between the memorials and the events themselves. The ancient past and the imminent future become fused as one cycle ends and the next identical one begins. He also explains how the depleted, old, natural and social worlds get purified and re-energized in body and soul. Om Shanti.